Summary of Something Wicked This Way comes by Bradbury. A week before Halloween, Will Halloway and Jim Nightshade, both 13, are approached by Tom Fury, a traveling lightning rod seller who says there will be a huge storm. Over 100,000 lightning rods have been sold to God-fearing people by Mr. Fury. He gives Jim one for free and tells the boy to nail it high on his roof or he'll be dead come dawn. Mr. Fury is on his way quickly, but Will and Jim are left waiting for a natural disaster, so they quickly nail the metal thing to Jim's roof. The boys then go on their weekly trip to the library in Greentown, where Will's dad, Charles, cleans the building. Charles is 54 years old, which makes him Will's grandpa. Every time Will sees him at the library, it's a surprise that old man, his work, his name. Will and Jim run home through the middle of town after checking out their books. Here they hear the faint sounds of fair music and smell cotton candy. Then, an ad for Kudger and Dark's Pandemonium Shadow Show, a moving circus, comes flying through the air and wraps around Jim's leg. The show is set to start the next day. Will doesn't believe it because carnivals don't usually come to town after Labor Day, but Jim is so excited he can hardly hold it in. Late that night, Will hears his parents talking about the fair, but he still doesn't believe it will happen this late in the year. When the clock on City Hall hits 3 a.m., Will wakes up to the sound of a train coming into town and the clear sound of a calliope. Will and Jim quickly get out of bed and run down to the railroad bridge in time to see the circus train pull a wailing calliope with no one playing it. A strange hot air balloon appears and hangs over the circus train as it stops in an open field. A man dressed in black then gets out of the caboose of the train. When he tells it to, the train comes to life, and the circus poles and paintings are set up almost instantly, even though clouds are blocking the moon's light. There is no sign of the balloon by the time the clouds clear. Will and Jim hurry back to their beds because they are sure that Kudger and Darks is not like other carnivals. Will and Jim get up early the next morning and run down to the carnival grounds. Even though the night before was scary, Kudger and Darks seems to be just a plain old carnival. The boys run into Miss Foley, who was their 7th grade teacher. She is looking for her visiting nephew from Wisconsin. Miss Foley goes into the mirror maze to look for him. When she sees the image of a young girl who looks a lot like herself as a child, she is scared to death. Miss Foley goes home to rest after the maze worker tells her she was the only customer in the maze. The fair is where Will and Jim spend the whole day. They go on all the rides and sights except the carousel, which has a sign saying it's out of order. The boys can't help but look around the carousel, and Mr. Kudger, the owner of the circus, calls them out on it. Mr. Kudger grabs Will and Jim by the scruff of their necks and pulls them off the broken carousel. But Mr. Dark, Kudger's partner, is nice and tells Kudger to put them down. He gives Jim a white business card that suddenly turns green to red. He tells Jim that once the carousel is fixed, the card will get him a free ride on it. The boys then act like they're going home, but they stay in a nearby tree and watch Mr. Dark start the wheel. It's going backwards though. Then Mr. Kudger gets on the merry-go-round. He rides it backwards 28 times before getting off next to a 12-year-old boy. Jim and Will follow Mr. Kudger as he leaves the circus and pretends to be Robert, Miss Foley's young nephew, at her house. Later, Will and Jim follow Robert back to the fair. When Robert gets on the carousel to turn back into Mr. Kudger, Will knocks the control box over by mistake. Robert goes around and around on the ride without being able to stop. There are well over 100 turns. He looks like a broken-down old man by the time the carousel stops. Will calls the cops and an ambulance right away because he thinks they may have killed Mr. Kudger by accident. But when help comes, Mr. Kudger is pretending to be Mr. Electrico, one of Mr. Dark's freak show's human oddities. Mr. Dark says he's sorry for the confusion and gives Will and Jim free tickets to ride the carousel again. This time, though, Will and Jim are sure that the circus is evil, but that doesn't mean they don't still want to ride the carousel and turn into men right away. That night, Will wakes up and realizes that Jim has taken the lightning rod off his roof. Suddenly, Mr. Dark's strongest and most dangerous freak, the Dust Witch, floats over the boys' houses in the carnival's hot air balloon and paints a line on Jim's roof with evil mercury paint. Will tricked the witch by using a yard hose to clean off her mark. He then used his arrow to pop the balloon, but it's clear that the fair is looking for them, so the boys won't have much time to hide. Will and Jim can't handle Mr. Dark and his freaks, so they need to get Charles's help right away. To help him beat the carnival, Charles looks to the books in the library. But when Mr. Dark sends the Dust Witch to kill Charles by stopping his heart, it looks like Charles has no choice but to give up and die. When the witch corners Charles, he suddenly can't help but laugh out loud. As he falls apart laughing uncontrollably, the witch's evil skills lose their power. While Charles fights the witch, Mr. Dark sneaks up on Will and Jim and takes them back to the fair to use their free spinning ride. Will is saved by Charles, and when Charles agrees to do Mr. Dark's world-famous bullet trick, he needs Will's assistance. Charles carves a crescent moon into the bullet instead of his initials, which stands for his smile. When he shoots it at the witch's mouth, the happiness it represents knocks her to the ground and kills her quickly. Will and Charles leave to find Jim while Mr. Dark runs away, but they have to go through the mirror maze first. Charles's image in the maze looks way too old, and he doesn't believe he can save Jim. But when Charles sees his son in the mirror behind him, he accepts that he is old and will die. He then screams so loudly that all the mirrors break, ending the maze. Jim is already on the wheel when he gets out of the maze. His eyes are closed. It looks like Jim is already dead by the time Charles stops the wheel and Will can get him off. In the meantime, Mr. Dark has changed into a boy named Jed, 9 years old, and is trying to trick Charles into killing him, but Charles knows him right away. The way Charles holds the boy close, almost lovingly, makes Mr. Dark sick with his love and goodness. Next, Jim and Charles do something completely stupid. They bring Jim back to life by dancing and singing, because they know that's the only thing that will make him feel better after seeing the horrible and scary show. As soon as Jim's recovery, Will, Jim, and Charles all make a joyful getaway from the carnival grounds together.
About the author. Ray Bradbury grew up in Illinois, Arizona, and Los Angeles. He is thought to be the most famous American author of science fiction and fantasy. He finished high school but didn't go to college. Instead, he got a job selling newspapers and started writing serious science fiction and fantasy stories. Dark Carnival was his first book, and it came out in 1947. He has written approximately 500 short stories, plays, novels, and poetry, as well as screenplays and teleplays over the course of a long and productive career. A lot of Bradbury's stories have been turned into movies, TV shows, and radio shows. The Martian Chronicles, Dandelion Wine, and Something Wicked This Way Comes are some of his best-known works, along with Fahrenheit 451. He won the National Book Award for Distinguished Contribution to American Letters in the year 2000.
Hope we summarized it fully and you liked it. Please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel so that we are motivated to create more videos.